Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Flame. Now, it has been a little while, but me and Ed are back after a great winter break. So let's dive into another episode. This time around, it is all about rubbing it in, but not overdoing it, and from smart to smarter automation. So, Ed, let's kick this off straight away. What does context automation mean?
So context is, what are the applicable parameters and values of what we are talking about for a specific. It could be a problem, it could be an issue, anything that provides some value as far as what are we talking about. So, when we say a context, so a lot of times, people say, "Well, I was taken out of context," or "This was taken out of context," and it's like. So when we're talking about what is the context of what we are actually meaning when we are doing something, right? So in this case, we're talking about automation rules, AI. The big thing with AI is context, right? So you can tell AI to do anything, but you usually need to give it as much context as possible so that you have the right outcome. So I want to create an app with a database is one thing, but I want to create a CRM that uses Postgres and does authentication. So you want to make sure that you can give as much context for that specific application, and the same goes for automation and rules from that perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the old style, when we look at kind of automation and how it's changed over the years, it used to be very rigid. It very much was an if this, then that kind of statement. If this happens, that's the context, the if, and then I want you to go and action whatever it is.
Right.
Now, context for me kind of comes in 4 levels. You've got the explicit stuff. So it is maybe this piece of metadata, maybe it's a field, it's a label, it's a person, it's a date, for example. You've got the implicit stuff. So that's more of the human side of it. So is there a particular sentiment? Is there a level of urgency? Can you start to spot patterns in the workflow in terms of the fields coming through? Then you've got environmental kind of factors. So that might be team capacity, might be system status, like things are down, environmental context, what system's down, what kind of region is it in, what's going on in the world. That's also really important. And then you got kind of like the organizational stuff as well. So like team structure, skills, projects, again, just basic things are going on. Now, when you then take an if this then that rule and apply all this new additional context, like you're saying, that we can do with AI, and ingest this piece about how our team is structured or what kind of things that we're doing. The level of automation that we can now do is it can understand who's going to be in because of holiday and automatically make sure that maybe dependent work items are scheduled in certain ways so that we can get around personal issues or highlight where skills are missing within the team and that you would have to do highlighting. Those are the types of automation and things that we can now start to see come kind of through the system.
Yeah, I think so historically, like you said, with the if then logic that's historically been used for automation, I think the explicit context and the environmental context have been pretty okay. So, explicit, this field equals this, then do that. Or environmental is like at 2:00 on Mondays, I want to run a report, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So those have been, fairly, utilized and easy to use. Now with the advent of AI, we're starting to be able to pick up on some of this implicit and organizational context. So implicit is, hey, I just created or a customer just replied to a support ticket, and I can tell based on their vocabulary, they seem very frustrated. And so based on that, I'm going to go ahead now and escalate this to a new status because of that kind of thing. So now AI is starting to be able to, get that implicit context, from the frustrations, the urgencies, and then also bring in like the organizational stuff of, hey, I know that, Dan is on the solutions architect team, and I know he has expertise in this specific problem. So now not only am I going to escalate it, I'm going to tag Dan as well, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's in that particular example, it's about finding the key stakeholders quicker so that we reduce impact time. It is about making sure that we maybe come across as more empathetic
Yep.
to the particular person, so that again we de-escalate any future scenarios. We can kind of re-understand and reevaluate that relationship. Those are some huge automatic values and immediate wins that we can now see because it's understanding the wider context.
Yep. Exactly. That implicit
Yeah.
context is going to be, it's going to be a game changer as far as, like you said, the AI senses the frustration and it replies in an empathetic manner, and then also takes the automation tasks as well to help
Yeah.
address that.
Yeah. So in order to kind of be able to do more contextual aware automations, we need to now start to ingest more knowledge, right? And
Yep.
that comes in multiple layers. So what have you got in terms of those layers?
I mean, so the classic one is, if we have a knowledge base that's available, say, i.e. in Confluence, if we have a knowledge base that has information on specific products. So like, for example, from an Appfire perspective, if we have a specific application and we have a knowledge base on the product capabilities, and as well as a knowledge base on frequently asked questions. So we can, ingest all that information for AI to be able to utilize that from that perspective. So, and then also from just the knowledge base, and then we can also pick up any historical tickets that may have been opened on that specific product,
Yeah.
right? So if we see any patterns, we can address the pattern if a customer opens a support ticket, but also say, hey, product, we're having a pattern that we're seeing here. Let's, send that to
Let's address
product
that,
to look
yeah.
at. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's it. When we think about knowledge ingestion, we often think, the default is always, because that's kind of what it has been with service desks and service management anyway, is knowledge bases. But knowledge can also be found in things like Slack.
Yep.
It can be found in, like you said, previous historical open tickets. Is there any patterns from that? What's going on in monitoring? If you're monitoring your own product, is there peak times? Is there lower times? Maybe your service is available 24/7. Maybe it's being hit 24/7. But those things are going to be able to help you identify what to do or where your concerns might be. And it's then going to be able to help you with future automation as well.
Yeah. And even, expanding further on that. So, you can now, go and look at communities like the Atlassian user community and, hey, what all questions have been asked about a specific product, and ingest those questions and what the answers are. And, again, you can start to make decisions on that, from that perspective. So knowledge ingestion is so important now from all different kind of angles and sources of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've got our knowledge and we've ingested that knowledge, we move on to kind of like this second layer, which is about enriching that content that we've now just ingested. So when I think about context enrichment, I am thinking about trying to apply, maybe do some reporting on it. So again, understand trends. Is there, we've identified these three problems. We've identified that they come up 90% of the time, or these are 60% similar. So we can group, we can relabel, we can add metadata to them. So it's about, I think a lot of the context enrichment comes around applying some metadata, but finding those trends.
Yeah. So yeah, we bring all this data in, right? So now what are we going to do with it? So now we need to either normalize it and then also group it into, like you said, either using tags or whatever method you want to organize it with, so that it makes it easier to now find and or utilize and or report on, kind of thing. So
Exactly.
just having a big old pool of data is great, but now we want to structure it and make sure that it is available and we can quickly report on it.
And that's exactly what Atlassian has done with that team at Graph, right? So they've got this huge entire data lake for your business, all your Confluence pages, all your Jira tickets, and by providing an understanding of how things are linking together, like similar space names from Jira to Confluence, or similar levels of priority, similar people, similar custom field identities. Like that is all of the teamwork graph kind of coming together and providing that context.
I love that. I love that. That and the teamwork graph is also going to expose a lot of, selfishly from Appfire's perspective, we can now have a lot of our app data available that we can combine with, the Atlassian platform as well from everything in Confluence and Jira, and then our apps as well. So that's going to be a nice. I'm looking forward to playing with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But if we think about that again, so that is about providing full context. Before, you would only have half a picture. If all of, if your Jira work item has this much information on your summary, your description, but then you have loads of amazing data within an app that isn't available in the teamwork graph, you're only ever getting half the context.
Yep.
So this is, again, making sure that you understand where your knowledge is, how it's going to be applied, and where it needs to be applied, and make sure that you can ingest that in the right way as well.
Yep.
Perfect. So now we move on to point 3, which is about that intelligence and decision logic making. So making sure that you're providing the right scoring. Maybe there is, there's plenty of different scoring types out there. When we think about maybe how we would prioritize work, you've got things like ICE, RICE, WSDRF, which is weighted shortest job first for those that don't know. And you would do a similar thing kind of with our knowledge again, wouldn't we?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to, now that we are, have this big group of data, and we're normalizing it, we're structuring it, and now we can start to do some weighting measurements as well for different aspects. When we're doing research, or we're AI's answering specific questions, and they have, is this the high confidence? Do we have a high confidence that this answer is the right answer? Obviously, we don't want hallucinations or anything like that. So we need to make sure that we can, have the right answer, or AI can have the right answer. And we are, very, certain that is the case. Obviously, sometimes we may need to have humans still in the loop to make sure that we're spot checking some of that information.
Absolutely.
But that weighted averages, or however we want to, specify.
Now, things that would be considered, maybe if we think about knowledge specific, it might be, how old is that knowledge? How often is it viewed? When was it last edited? Those are some just very easy, quick identifiers, whether or not there's some value in this information. You also might say and understand, like, is there duplicate information, and maybe a page over here has only half the information, whereas this has a full set of information. So you might want to leverage. So again, that's about trying to make, or AI would help you make those better intelligent decisions by saying, okay, well, I believe after ingesting this one over here, because it has more information, because it's more up to date, would be the better one to give you over the other page, for example.
Yep, 100%, man. You got it.
Yeah. And then we come into point 4. So that's about the action with validation. So if this actually would rely on that scoring. So, if you've got intelligent rules, if you've, okay, let me start this one kind of thought process or example that I've got. When I am talking to my AI agent, I would say, I want you to act as, actually, I did this today. I asked you to act as a graphic designer. Here's some context, but I don't think I've given you enough. So I'm going to ask you to ask me questions until you can come back and you feel confident enough that you have the full context to then go and execute.
Yeah. Complete understanding, right? Yep.
Exactly. So if we think about that particular example, I've provided some knowledge. It has ingested that knowledge. It has then made sure to enrich its previous database or set from that chat. And then it's saying, okay, well, I have maybe a 60% scoring right now in terms of confidence. And you have told me that I cannot automatically execute until I have maybe a 90 or a 95.
Yep.
So how am I going to fill that 30 to 35 gap difference? Well, I'm going to ask you questions until I've continued to enrich my context, until I've then got the right validation. So that's just one very particular example about how we might then continue to, or you only action once you've validated the percentage of your score that you want to go from.
I love that though, because that expands. It's such, that thought process right there is exactly how you should be approaching, if you do vibe coding. So if you are actually using AI to help build apps or to help create, enablement pieces of material, asking it questions until it knows it understands it is probably one of the most valuable things that you can use, because a lot of people just try to, just here's what I want, go do it. And then AI will do that. Oh yeah, it'll do it, but it may not be exactly what you wanted, because again, to come back to what we're talking about is getting it all the right context. It doesn't have all the right context until it knows and it understands, and it doesn't know that until it is asked questions or you have given it all the context so that it knows exactly what to do from that perspective. So that asking back and forth, that conversation is a huge part of getting that context for the AI, and whatever AI you're using, whether it's LLM or even Rovo and Atlassian.
Yeah. But this is also, if we think about previous episodes where we've spoken about human in the loop, for example, right? You are constantly making sure that they are not only aware of your current context score records. So in this case, when I gave that initial one, it scored itself at 60%. And it knew, because I had told it to not action until 90 to 95% certain it was going to know what I wanted. So the human is aware that the particular chat that I was using at this time was 30% different in terms of that score. So it constantly asked me questions. It knew the responses that I gave and then said, based on the previous answers, summarize what I wanted. Human in the loop again. It is now more aware of what I wanted.
Yep.
It rescored itself. As it was going through the things that I asked it to do, it was providing me comments. Is this still correct? This is what I've done based on this. That is about, again, making sure that you have correctly said you can only action when this is happening, and so the human is still in the loop, the human is still in control and regained that level of autonomy, but you have still continuously made sure that the automation, so that side of saying like, go do this task for me automatically, is got the information it needs.
If anyone gets anything out of this episode right here, I think it's that right there, is that the humans in the loops are the orchestrators for AI to get the appropriate context that it needs to do what you want it to do, right?
Yeah.
I have this right now. I have this visual in my head of, I don't know if you remember the old Disney movie Fantasia, where Mickey Mouse is the wizard, and he's just like orchestrating all the moving mops and everything.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what the AI is now with humans, right? We're the orchestrator, and we're telling it what to do. It'll do what we want it to do, but to make it do exactly what we want to do and do it better, we have to give it that context. And then it's either we got to provide it, or we have to have a conversation back and forth until it understands exactly what we are doing or what we want.
That's the key thing. It's about it is accepting that you do not know everything first off, or if you do, making sure that you at least can constantly give it, and just don't be like, go create me a picture, right?
Yeah.
You need to give it everything. And then we finally come on to that kind of the fifth stage is about the learning loop. So this fits in really perfectly, right? Which is the first time it gave me that picture back, because again, the example was that I was using it as a graphic designer. The picture wasn't right. I highlighted the things. I said, this needs to change. This is what I want. I think you should re-ask me some of these questions. Maybe we didn't answer it correct. That is about providing feedback.
Yep.
And the more we look at this as a continuous improvement kind of model versus a one and done task, is the more refined a final response will become.
Yeah, that feedback loop. We've talked about it before in DevOps, where you have the infinite circle kind of thing, where you have design, build, test, deploy, feedback loop goes back in. It's the same thing with AI development and providing context. For this specific example here, is that we can continuously have that feedback loop to feed into the context, to keep refining it, to make sure that it does exactly what we want it to do, but then get smarter as far as what are we doing from an automation perspective, and making sure that we're doing the exact right thing every time. Yeah,
absolutely. So Ed, let's just switch gears and again give a slightly different example. Now, I know right now this will date it, but you are taking part in a hackathon.
Yes.
So how have you thought about the 5 stages of contextual automation when you have been building your app?
Yeah, so the app that I'm building is a reminder app, and it basically is going to have custom reminders. So instead of or custom snooze actions. So instead of the default 5, 10, 15 minutes, you can snooze it for 7 minutes or 23 minutes or whatever you need kind of thing. And it's going to have some stronger recurring rules. So if I need to set a reminder every Tuesday, every month, whatever kind of thing. So what I had to do was first, knowledge. So the first one, knowledge ingestion. So what do I know about how I'm going to produce this app? And so I had to use an MCP server, Context 7, that was going to pull in all the API documents that I needed to have for my technology stack. So I made sure I had all those. I had information from competitive or competing reminder apps that are already out in the market, and some of my comments on what I thought was too complex that they were having. So I was getting all my knowledge base in there to have that. And then what I would do from the context enrichment is like, here's what I like about this app. Here's what I don't like about this app. Here are the requirements that I need to have for my specific app per the hackathon, and what they need. So they needed to have, needs to be able to sync across devices. So if I have an iPhone device and an Android device and I snooze something over here on iPhone, it needs to snooze over here on Android, right? So I had to get all the context lined up and, kind of, as we said, context enrichment from that perspective. And then, start to have a conversation with AI. Okay, here's my requirements. Here's all my data. Here's everything I want. I have built a product requirements document. How should we go about building this app, and what technology stack should we recommend? And then I had a back and forth where I was suggesting, the back end to be Supabase, and then the AI said, well, if you want real time and faster, Firebase is going to be a better option. Then I did my own research and saw that was correct. I'm like, okay, we'll go with Firebase for the back end kind of thing. So, and that kind of led into, the action with validation, where we're having that conversation. And then I am very confident in what the AI is giving me as far as how we're going to produce this, and then what the time frame of building each of these features is going to be, and make sure that we can do that in time for the hackathon deadline kind of thing. And so got through building all that out, and then going through that learning loop again. It's like, okay. And then when I was going through testing, I was like, man, I really don't like the way this UI looks kind of thing. I think it'll be confusing to the user. What do you think, AI? And the AI is like, I agree. Here's what I would recommend. And then I was like, be able to pick and choose, like, yeah, let's do this. And so finally, through all that conversation, I've got the app done, and it is about ready to be submitted. So we'll see.
So yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example, right? Again, like how you chose the four main kind of things with the underlying fifth stage of like constant human in the loop. You provided the knowledge, you enriched the context, you understood and provided scoring, and then you only actioned once you had that validation, right? And that's a really, really good example of how to do it. Now, let's kind of wind that back and actually think about the Atlassian ecosystem, obviously because of what we do, and how that might think similar. So, for example, let's take the Atlassian Intelligence Engine and use Rovo as our chat agent. We might say, ingest my knowledge is my knowledge base, and maybe the contracts that I have with my customers, that maybe we store a version of that somewhere in our Atlassian system, and we have a service project. Now, that is the context. Oh, and historical tickets, of course.
I guess.
Now,
yes.
Exactly. So now we've got all of our knowledge. Now, the overall arching we might want to say is when an SLA is coming up for about to fail, we might, or maybe we want to protect against our SLAs from failing, especially when they've got a bad sentiment, for example. So Atlassian Intelligence ingests all of our knowledge from our Atlassian ecosystem and our contracts. And now what we're also saying is, I want you to go and read the sentiment from the tickets and understand if our customers are happy and whether or not they're working within the timeframes that we set within the contracts.
Yeah. And
maybe there's a clause in there that says if they're not happy, it has to be escalated within 2 days, for example. Now, you can use that context that it's applying, and it's enriching that data from the knowledge base. And then you can say, okay, well, I believe as a scoring, this is 80% happy or 80% unhappy. And at that point, you could flag and be like, okay, Ed, I think this is 80% unhappy. You as the service manager now have to review that. So you're notifying, you are that is how you're getting that validation before action. And if it then does turn out, you could have a second automation, for example, to maybe automatically escalate the ticket or bring in management or whatever it might be.
Yep.
But those are kind of, it's scored it, it's understood it, it's keeping the human in the loop at all the time. That's a really easy example to kind of help relate.
Yeah, I think that's where, like we said earlier, is that's where a lot of this implicit context is going to start coming into
exactly
into scope here, where Rovo is going to understand that, hey, a customer just replied to this ticket and they are not very happy. So we don't want to reply with, hey, did you reboot the computer? We want to be, empathetic. It's like, I understand your frustrations. Now here's what we're doing, kind of thing, to alleviate that frustration, kind of thing. So yeah,
absolutely. Now, how would we maybe actually go ahead and kind of implement such a thing?
Yeah. So, what we're going to do is we're going to have to do an assessment, right? So we're going to have to see, what automations do we have already, and then, are they addressing specific pain points, or can we, improve those automations? What knowledge bases are being accessed already, right? And do we have any baseline metrics for, CSAT scores, or do we have any baseline metrics for, we can see a trend on specific types of issues being created, whether it's a specific issue type or specific, at a point in time, like every month, we're always getting these specific type of issues. Why is that? So can we find these trends? So, assess what we have in place already from an automation perspective. Do we have any pain points that we can, immediately tick off? What are all our knowledge sources? Do we have any additional ones that we should be bringing in? And then what kind of baseline metrics do we have, right? So then, we can, instead of attacking everything all at once, let's just pick one workflow, one item, one pain point that we can see if we can improve. Add a human element in there just to track what's going on from an AI perspective. And then if we can measure that improvement for that specific one item, one workflow, one automation, we can then repeat it. We can almost templatize it, kind of thing. And then once we do that, we can start expanding to the other automations that we may have. Again, do we have all the right context coming in from our knowledge sources? Do we have the human in the loop to be able to adjust and or have conversations and or make sure that the confidence metrics is there for how AI is performing? And then from that perspective, let's expand it out to, make sure everyone on our team understands how these automations are working from that perspective. Have those conversations with the team that they can, go back and forth with in this case, Rovo agent. And then make sure that you have the continuous feedback loop that's going back into, your team understanding this, but also your AI automations that you have just implemented. They can always be continuously tweaked based on feedback, whether that's weekly.
But I think that's the key thing there is like, let's start really small. Let's assess the current landscape. Let's put in some baseline metrics, because if we're going to try and improve it, we need to know what we're currently, or maybe our throughput is or whatever.
Yep.
And then let's, like you said, identify one thing. Let's start with a really quick win to see if we can move that needle forward, right? So maybe it's about, rather than constantly having to triage every ticket with a human, maybe there's certain things that you can automatically triage because you've got all the context in there. So you can just make sure that you do that. That saves the team time. You've already guaranteed you've got the information, maybe through required fields, for example. So you can automatically do that. And then once you've done that, you reassess, and then you learn, and then you go again. can we now improve this more? Can we continue to provide more context, more knowledge for it to make those decisions on?
Yeah.
Is there more empathy, or sorry, the implicit things? Maybe again, now start looking at sentiment. Maybe now start looking at urgency and priority coming through. Maybe understanding dates is an important thing.
Exactly.
Like those are really good kind of factors to then kind of consider and move forward with.
Yep. And I'm going to hammer home this again. If there's one or two things you take out of this episode, it's one is having that, getting the context correct means having that conversation with the AI to make sure it understands exactly what you want it to do. And then having the feedback loops to make sure that you keep having the automation get smarter. It knows, now based on the feedback, it can keep incrementally getting smarter for what you want it to do for that automation.
Not talking about AI in the future, but talking about it right now, it can be very, very smart. It can help us massively because it's got so much more knowledge than maybe we can store up in our brains.
Yep.
However, if we do not provide the context on how to use that brain, it cannot ever be smarter. So we need to download what's in our heads in a format that it can use and go from.
It's another knowledge source to build the context from.
Exactly. Okay, that has been a great episode, and it is great to be back, Ed. I'm very much looking forward to these again. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Beyond the Flame, and see you in the next one.